The ER. riders arrived on Earth without warning. They appeared from the blackness of space, their ships looming above the planet. Their fleet was massive, powerful, and terrifying. No one knew where they had come from or why they were here. All the world's governments scrambled to respond, but their efforts were useless. The riders' technology was far beyond anything Earth had ever seen. They struck quickly, wiping out military bases, cities, and anything that stood in their way. For days, it seemed like the end of the world. People hid in fear, unsure of what to do. The news broadcasted terrifying images of the riders' ships hovering over the Earth, firing deadly beams of energy down at the surface. The skies were filled with their ships, and no one knew how to stop them. But in the midst of the chaos, something strange was happening beneath the surface. A small group of people, ordinary, unknown humans, began to experience strange changes. It started with a few whispers in the dark, rumors of a hidden power that had been lying dormant in certain people for centuries. At first, no one believed it. The world was in panic. How could there be anything left to save them from the riders? But as the days passed, the truth started to emerge. In secret, these chosen people began to discover their new abilities. It wasn't just any kind of power. It was ancient, something older than the riders themselves. These humans scattered across different parts of the world could feel the change. Some had enhanced strength, others could read minds, while some found they could move objects with nothing but their will. These abilities weren't random. They had been waiting for this moment. The moment when Earth would need them the most. In one small village, a man named Daniel felt it first. He had always been ordinary, a farmer working the fields with his hands. But one day, as he worked, he felt something stir inside him. He didn't understand it at first, but when a piece of heavy farm equipment fell toward him, he instinctively reached out and stopped it mid-air. His heart raced. What was happening to him? He didn't know, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't the only one. Across the ocean, a scientist named Sarah discovered a hidden blueprint in an old, forgotten research archive. She was working at a government lab when she came across it by accident. The blueprint was ancient, but the technology it described was unlike anything she had ever seen. It seemed impossible. But as she began to understand it, she realized the truth: it was a weapon designed to fight against the riders. Not a modern weapon, but something far older. Something that had been buried beneath Earth's surface for thousands of years. As more people like Daniel and Sarah awakened to their powers, they began to come together. They were drawn to each other, as if some invisible force was guiding them. They formed a secret group, planning how to fight back against the riders. The world's governments were too busy trying to survive, too divided to be of any real help. It was up to this small group of humans to turn the tide of the war. The riders, meanwhile, seemed to know nothing of the growing resistance. They were focused on their mission to conquer Earth. Their ships continued to rain destruction down on the planet, but they didn't know what was coming. They didn't know that Earth had a secret weapon, one far more powerful than anything they had ever encountered. As the resistance group trained, they began to unlock the true extent of their abilities. Daniel could move entire trucks with his mind. Sarah could see into the future in brief glimpses, just enough to help guide their strategies. Others had even more strange and terrifying powers. But they were united by one thing: the desire to protect their home. Then, the first real confrontation came. The riders launched a major offensive on a city that had managed to stay hidden from their radar. The city's resistance group was ready. When the riders arrived, they were met with a force unlike any they had ever faced. Daniel, leading the charge, used his newfound abilities to crush the invaders. His strength and speed surprised even him. He had never imagined he could do such things. The battle was brutal. The riders fought back with all their might. They fought with a fury and determination that the riders didn't expect. The power of Earth's secret weapon was slowly being revealed. And just when the riders thought they had won, Sarah used her ability to glimpse the future and predicted their next move, turning the tide in favor of the humans. The battle ended in a victory for the resistance, but it was only the beginning. The riders now knew that Earth wasn't as weak as they had thought. They would come back, stronger and more determined than ever. But the humans had learned something too. The secret weapon was real, and they had only begun to understand its power. As the dust settled and the survivors looked around, they realized something even more shocking. The true weapon wasn't just the powers of the chosen few. It was something far deeper, a connection that bound all of humanity together. A force of will, of unity, that the riders could never hope to break. The battle for Earth had just begun, and the riders were about to learn that humans were more dangerous than they could ever imagine. And the secret weapon? It was only getting started. The skies above Earth darkened as the D riders arrived. Their ships, massive and powerful, cast shadows over entire continents. The world watched in horror as these terrifying invaders began their attack. Cities were destroyed in moments, and the world's military forces, despite their best efforts, were no match for the riders' advanced weaponry. It seemed like the end was near. There was no place left to hide, and no one knew how to stop them. Among the chaos, one person stood out, a scientist named Emma Carter. She was working at a research facility when the attack began. She wasn't a soldier, and she had no weapons. But she was brilliant, and she understood the importance of something that no one else knew about. During her years of research, she had uncovered an ancient artifact buried deep within Earth. It was not just any artifact, but a device that could change the course of the battle. Emma had spent years studying it, and she had always known that it would play a role in Earth's future. But she never imagined it would happen like this. As the destruction continued, Emma realized the artifact was Earth's last hope. She wasn't sure how it worked, but she knew she had to find a way to activate it before it was too late. The world's leaders were too busy panicking to focus on anything else. The military had already given up on conventional tactics. Emma knew she had to act quickly, or humanity would be wiped out without a fight. But there was a problem. The artifact was hidden deep in the mountains, far from any major cities. It was located in a secret underground facility, one that Emma had no access to. The riders had already destroyed many communication systems, and getting to the facility would be nearly impossible without a way to bypass the riders' forces. Emma decided to take the risk. She gathered a small team of survivors, people she could trust, and they set off towards the facility. The journey was dangerous. They traveled through cities that had been reduced to rubble, avoiding riders' patrols at every turn. Along the way, they encountered others who had lost hope, people who had given up on survival. But Emma kept pushing forward, reminding her team that they had something the riders didn't know about. They had a chance. Days passed, and the group's supplies began to run low. They were exhausted, but they kept going. Emma knew they couldn't afford to stop. The riders had no mercy, and if they were caught, it would be the end. Each day, they grew closer to the underground facility, but with each step, the danger grew greater. Then, they finally reached the mountains. The entrance to the secret facility was hidden beneath a waterfall, a place Emma knew well from her research. As they made their way inside, the facility's security systems came to life, but Emma had prepared for this. She used her knowledge of the system to disable the security, allowing the team to enter. The facility was ancient, its walls covered in dust, but the artifact was still there, just as Emma remembered it. It was a small device, almost unnoticeable, but its power was immense. She approached it cautiously, unsure of what would happen next. The device hummed to life as soon as she touched it, and suddenly, the room was filled with a strange energy. "What's happening?" one of the team members asked, his voice filled with fear. Emma didn't answer. She was focused on the artifact. It was responding, but she had no idea how to control it. The artifact's energy began to pulse faster, and Emma felt a strange connection to it. She wasn't sure if it was the device or something inside her, but she knew that the fate of Earth rested on what happened next. As she concentrated, the artifact's energy began to form a map of the riders' fleet. Emma realized that the artifact didn't just have the power to destroy, it could also control the very fabric of time itself. With the right knowledge, she could reverse the riders' attack and stop them before they even arrived on Earth. But there was a catch. The process was risky, and it would require a sacrifice, one that Emma wasn't sure she was ready to make. Her team watched in silence as she debated. The choice was hers. The sacrifice was hers. She could use the artifact's power to save humanity, but at what cost? Without a word, Emma made her decision. She activated the artifact. The energy burst forth in a brilliant flash of light, and Emma was engulfed in it. Her team members screamed her name, but it was too late. The artifact's power was too strong, and Emma had no control over it anymore. The world outside seemed to stop for a moment, as if everything was frozen in time. And then it happened. The AD Riders' ships began to retreat. Their fleet, once invincible, was now fleeing the planet, as if something was pulling them away. The light from the artifact slowly faded, and Emma's team found themselves standing in the facility, confused but relieved. They had won, but at a great cost. Emma was gone. She had sacrificed herself to activate the artifact and save humanity. The world would never forget her bravery. The riders had been stopped, but at a terrible price. Emma had given everything to ensure the survival of Earth, and her story would be remembered for generations to come. The battle was over, but the war was far from finished. Emma's sacrifice had given humanity a chance to rebuild. The artifact, though powerful, was now gone. But the last hope was not just in the device, it was in the people who had survived. They would carry on, knowing that they had the strength to fight back, no matter what came next. And somewhere, in the deepest parts of the universe, the AD Riders would remember the planet they once tried to conquer. They would remember Earth's last hope and the price that had been paid to protect it. The first sign of the AD Riders' arrival was a silence unnerving and absolute. It wasn't the usual hum of engines or the sound of ships entering the atmosphere. It was as if the very air itself had been sucked out, leaving Earth's sky still and unnatural. No one knew where they came from or why they chose Earth, but once their ships appeared, the world would never be the same. The riders were unlike anything humanity had ever faced. Their ships were massive and sleek, cloaked in a strange, shifting black mist that seemed to swallow the light around them. They appeared from the void of space, seemingly out of nowhere. They didn't speak, they didn't communicate, they simply descended. With each ship that landed, the ground trembled, cities crumbled, and hope faded. The world's military was powerless against their overwhelming power. Earth had never been more vulnerable. In the quiet aftermath of the invasion, Earth's leaders convened in desperation. Nations fell, alliances broke, and chaos spread. It seemed like there was no plan that could stop them. The riders' technology was so advanced that nothing could touch them. The world had nothing to fight back with. But in a small, quiet corner of the world, a young woman named Lily had a different idea. Lily was a historian, not a soldier, not a scientist, but someone who had studied Earth's past. She'd always been fascinated by the old stories, the forgotten legends of civilizations that had come before. One legend, in particular, had caught her attention. It spoke of a war between Earth's ancient ancestors and a mysterious alien race, an alien race that sounded too similar to the riders. She believed that the key to fighting back wasn't in new technology, but in understanding what had happened long ago. Lily began digging into old records, ancient texts, and long-forgotten relics. She worked in secret, knowing that if the riders knew what she was doing, they would stop her. She was looking for a way to uncover the lost history that could lead to humanity's survival. What she discovered, however, was something even more terrifying. The riders had been to Earth before. Long ago, they had fought a war against humanity's ancestors. And they had lost. But the war had been so destructive that it had erased all memory of their existence. It was a forgotten history, buried deep beneath Earth's surface. The riders had tried to wipe out humanity once, but they hadn't finished the job. Now, they were back to finish what they had started. The more Lily uncovered, the clearer the picture became. The riders weren't here to conquer. They were here to finish what they had failed to do centuries ago. They had returned to Earth, drawn by the ancient energy that still lingered in the planet's core, the very energy that had once driven them away. Lily realized that Earth had something the riders desperately wanted, and that was their biggest mistake. Humanity wasn't as helpless as it seemed. She shared her findings with a small group of trusted allies, scientists, soldiers, and resistance fighters who believed in her vision. Together, they formed a secret plan, one that would take them into the heart of the Riders' invasion force. They needed to find the ancient power that had repelled the Riders in the First War. But finding it wouldn't be easy. It was hidden deep underground, in a place where the Riders would never think to look. The risk was immense, but it was humanity's only chance. As Lily and her team journeyed toward the ancient site, the world around them was in chaos. The Riders' presence loomed large, their ships hovering above the earth, casting an ominous shadow. Every day, more cities fell. The world's resistance seemed to grow weaker. But Lily refused to give up. She knew that this was the moment when humanity would either rise or fall. The journey was dangerous. The Riders had set up checkpoints, and anyone who got too close to their ships was quickly captured or killed. But Lily's team was careful. They moved in the shadows, using the knowledge Lily had uncovered to stay one step ahead of the Riders. They navigated through underground tunnels, avoiding detection at every turn. Each step forward was a risk, but it was the only path that could save Earth. Finally, they reached the ancient site, hidden deep beneath a forgotten city. What they found there was beyond anything Lily had expected. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a living energy, an ancient force that had once protected Earth from the Riders. The energy was contained in an enormous crystal, pulsing with a strange, powerful light. It was this energy that had driven the Riders away centuries ago. It was the key to defeating them now. But as they approached the crystal, the Riders found them. A massive ship appeared above them, its dark silhouette blocking the light. The Riders had known they were coming, and now there was no escape. They descended upon the site, their soldiers landing with precision. Lily's team prepared for the final battle, knowing that they might not make it out alive. The energy crystal hummed, its power growing stronger as the Riders closed in. In a desperate move, Lily activated the crystal. The energy surged through the ground, and the entire site was filled with blinding light. The Riders were thrown back, their ships shaking in the sky. The ground trembled, and the energy from the crystal seemed to reach out, consuming everything in its path. The Riders screamed in shock and anger as their technology began to fail. They had never encountered anything like this before. The power of Earth's ancient defense had returned, stronger than ever. The crystal had unleashed a force that even the Riders couldn't escape. Their ships began to retreat, their forces scattering as the power of Earth overwhelmed them. Lily and her team stood in awe, watching as the Riders' fleet retreated back into the void. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The Riders would return. But now, humanity knew they weren't alone. They had a weapon, an ancient power that would help them fight back. And as the dust settled, Lily knew one thing for sure: the Riders would never forget Earth. And this time, humanity would be ready. The world had thought it was safe. For years, humanity had fought off countless alien invasions, pushing back the darkness that threatened to swallow Earth. The HFY Riders, with their immense power, had come and gone, defeated by Earth's last hope, the secret resistance known only as the Protectors. But what they didn't know was that the greatest threat of all was already among them. Everything had seemed normal when the Riders' ships disappeared into the distance. People celebrated their victory, believing Earth had won yet another battle. The leaders of the world, who had once been divided, now stood united, celebrating humanity's resilience. They praised the Protectors, the group who had turned the tide of the war, who had uncovered the hidden ancient powers that helped defeat the Riders. But as the days passed, strange things began to happen. A sense of unease spread throughout the globe. Whispered rumors of betrayal began to surface, of a dark shadow within the Protectors themselves. The world's leaders dismissed it at first. They had no reason to doubt their heroes. But then, one by one, things started going wrong. It all began with the disappearance of Commander Ethan, the leader of the Protectors. Ethan had been the one who led the charge against the Riders, the one who had unlocked the power of the ancient artifacts. He was a hero, someone who could do no wrong. But when he vanished, without a trace, people began to question everything. Lena, a former soldier who had fought alongside Ethan, refused to believe it. She knew him better than anyone. Ethan wouldn't disappear without a reason. Something was wrong, and she couldn't shake the feeling that his disappearance was tied to something far darker than anyone realized. Lena began to investigate. She dug into the Protector's records, speaking with the other members of the team. They told her nothing, their eyes darting nervously as they denied any knowledge of Ethan's whereabouts. But Lena could tell they were hiding something. And the deeper she dug, the more unsettling the truth became. The Protectors had never been just a group of noble heroes. They were built on lies that stretched back to the very beginning of the war. Lena discovered that Ethan had known about the Riders' return long before anyone else. He had kept the information hidden, a secret from even the highest-ranking officials. But why? What was his real role in all of this? Lena's search led her to a hidden facility, a place buried deep beneath the Earth's surface, a place that no one was supposed to know about. Inside, she found what she had feared, a secret that had been kept from the world. Ethan wasn't missing. He was part of a covert operation that had been working with the Riders all along. The Protectors weren't heroes, they were traitors. The truth hit Lena like a freight train. Ethan had been working with the Riders, using the ancient powers to create a hidden alliance between Earth's leaders and the invaders. His goal was never to defeat them, but to manipulate them, to control the outcome of the war. The Protectors had been nothing more than puppets in a game much larger than they could have imagined. And Lena had been one of those puppets. The realization sank in. Lena felt a deep, gnawing anger. She had trusted Ethan with her life. She had fought beside him, believed in him. How could he have betrayed them all? How could he have allowed the Riders to use humanity for their own gain? Determined to stop the betrayal, Lena confronted the remaining Protectors. She had to know the truth, and she was willing to do anything to get it. One by one, they cracked. They admitted their roles in the deception, revealing that they had been under Ethan's control from the start. The Protectors had known about the Riders' return, but instead of fighting them, they had been preparing to surrender Earth to them. The Riders had promised power in return for humanity's obedience, and Ethan had believed it was the only way to save the planet from destruction. But Lena knew that no matter how much they justified their actions, it was still a betrayal of the highest order. The Riders were not here to help. They were here to conquer, and they had used the Protectors as pawns in their game. The trust of the world had been shattered, and the very idea of a hero had been corrupted beyond recognition. With no time to lose, Lena made her decision. She would stop the Riders, no matter the cost. She couldn't let Ethan's treachery succeed. She couldn't let the Riders take control of Earth, not after all the sacrifices her people had made. Lena gathered a small group of loyal soldiers, those who still believed in humanity's fight. Together, they launched a final assault on the Riders' command center, knowing that it would likely be a suicide mission. But they couldn't let the betrayal stand. They had to end it, or Earth would never be free again. The battle was fierce. Lena and her team fought their way through the Riders' defenses, determined to reach Ethan and put an end to his plans. Finally, in the heart of the Riders' stronghold, they found him. Ethan was waiting, as if he had been expecting them. He didn't seem surprised to see Lena. His face was cold, calculating. "You never understood, did you?" Ethan said, his voice calm and almost soothing. "We're not the real enemy. The Riders were always going to win, no matter what. This was the only way. You were just too blind to see it." Lena's heart burned with fury as she raised her weapon. "You betrayed us all. Earth will never forgive you." The final confrontation was brutal, but in the end, Lena's team emerged victorious. Ethan was defeated, but the cost was high. The Riders, though weakened, were still a threat, and the world was left to pick up the pieces of a broken alliance. Lena stood amidst the wreckage, knowing that this betrayal would haunt her forever. But she also knew one thing: humanity would rise again. And next time, they would never fall for the ultimate betrayal. The world had always believed that the great battles were fought in the open, with explosions lighting up the sky and soldiers facing off on distant battlefields. But there was a war, a secret war, fought in the shadows of society, one that humanity never knew about. It had been going on for decades, hidden from the public eye, a battle that would determine the fate of Earth itself. Sophie Thomas had lived a normal life, or so she thought. She worked as a researcher in a small lab, studying patterns in nature and trying to find ways to improve the world. But one day, everything changed. While working late one evening, Sophie discovered something strange in her data, something she couldn't explain. It was a signal, an energy pulse coming from deep beneath the Earth's surface. It was unlike anything she had ever encountered. Her first instinct was to dismiss it as an error, but the more she looked into it, the more she realized it was real. Her curiosity led her to a government research facility where, she was told, the same signal had been detected years ago. The scientists working there had been investigating it, but the project was deemed too dangerous and shut down. Sophie, determined to understand what was happening, managed to gain access to the classified files. What she found was shocking. The signal wasn't from Earth. It was from something or someone else. For years, hidden groups of powerful individuals, people Sophie thought she could trust, had been working alongside an alien race, a race that had been secretly influencing human affairs. They had been guiding the course of history, using humanity as pawns in a much larger game. The Hidden War, as it was called, had been waged silently, with Earth's leaders and the alien invaders making deals, manipulating the events of the world to secure their own interests. The aliens, known as the HFY, had first arrived on Earth decades ago. At first, they seemed like a peaceful race, offering advanced technology in exchange for resources. But over time, it became clear that their true intentions were far more sinister. The HFY had been slowly infiltrating human society, planting agents in key positions of power. They used their technology to manipulate events, triggering wars and political unrest, all in an effort to weaken humanity so they could take control of the planet. Sophie's discovery shook her to the core. The war she'd been living through, the economic crises, the political upheavals, even the strange weather patterns had all been part of the HFY's plan. They had been manipulating human history for their own benefit. But now, the question was, what could she do with this information? No one would believe her. The people she trusted had all been part of the conspiracy. But Sophie wasn't alone. She soon found a group of underground rebels, people who had also discovered the truth and had been fighting the hidden war in secret. They had been monitoring the HFY, trying to stop their plans without alerting the public. These rebels had been working quietly for years, trying to undo the damage caused by the aliens' influence. They were the last line of defense against an enemy no one knew existed. Sophie joined their ranks, and together they began to piece together the larger picture. The HFY were preparing for something big, something that would finally tip the scales in their favor. Sophie had to act fast. The fate of the world depended on her. As the rebels dug deeper into the HFY's plans, they discovered a hidden facility beneath the mountains, a place where the aliens had been building something that would give them absolute control over Earth. The facility was well guarded, and the rebels knew that getting in wouldn't be easy. But they also knew it was their only chance to stop the war from escalating. Sophie led the group to the facility. It was a dangerous mission, and they knew the odds were stacked against them. The closer they got, the more the tension grew. The HFY had detected their movements, and the facility's defenses were activated. Sophie and her team fought their way through, narrowly avoiding capture at every turn. They could feel the weight of the world on their shoulders, knowing that if they failed, the consequences would be catastrophic. Finally, they reached the heart of the facility. Inside, they found what the HFY had been building, a massive machine, a device that could control Earth's electromagnetic field, allowing the aliens to manipulate human minds and bend them to their will. It was a weapon like nothing humanity had ever seen. If activated, the device would allow the HFY to take full control of the planet, enslaving humanity and turning Earth into a puppet world. Sophie knew they had to destroy the device, but doing so would require a sacrifice. The rebels didn't have enough time to destroy the facility and escape. The machine was already powered up, and the countdown to activation had begun. With no other choice, Sophie made the ultimate decision. She would stay behind and destroy the device, even if it meant she would never make it out alive. The others tried to stop her, but Sophie was resolute. The world needed her to do this. She activated the self-destruct sequence and ran for the exit, hoping her team would make it out in time. As Sophie's team fled, the ground shook, and the facility erupted in flames. The machine was destroyed, and the Xerx plans were thwarted for now. The hidden war was over, but Sophie's sacrifice had cost her everything. The world would never know the truth about the war that had been fought in secret. Sophie's name would be forgotten, her actions erased from history. But she had saved Earth. And in the end, that was all that mattered.